Just seeing if you guys are paying attention. Hey, everybody. Chuck Holden here. I was just getting set up and I think my recording software changed something because I used to start streaming and then go live later. But now it looks like when I start streaming, it just automatically goes live. But whatever, we'll take it. How you doing, everybody? Happy Monday. I hope you had a good Sunday. Hope you got a chance to go to church. I am here in Panama, and we've had some very interesting things happening with immigration and the issues here in Panama, because as you know, hundreds of thousands of people come through Panama from Colombia, walk through the Darien Gap every year, and then make their way up to the United States. That poses a large burden on Panama and on the United States, of course. And it's been a real problem here. It was actually the reason that the current president was elected. President Molino actually got himself elected by making immigration the big issue. And that's kind of interesting because it wasn't an issue until myself and some other journalists like Michael Yon, Oscar Blue Ramirez, and Ben Berkwam started making it an issue, and people here in Panama started getting wind of the fact that it was costing their country a lot of money to house and feed all these migrants that were coming through. Before that, the former president had done a pretty good job of hiding the migration issue from the people and busing the migrants directly from the Darien Gap all the way up to Costa Rica, dropping them off. Nobody in Panama was any the wiser for the most part. But when we started reporting on the incredible amount of money it was costing, reporting on the environmental damage that was being done out in the Darien Gap, and how it was affecting the Indian populations out there, about all of the United Nations and other NGOs that were here in Panama taking advantage of the situation to make themselves a lot of money, all of a sudden it became an issue, and it actually ended up getting the president elected. So he got elected on a platform of, I'm going to close the Darien Gap, and I'm going to stop the migrant flow through Panama, which would reduce the number of people coming into the United States by about 500,000 people. Doesn't sound like much when there's 5 million a year coming into the U.S. during the Biden administration, but it actually is pretty significant because the people who are coming through the Darien Gap are most specifically, the kind of people that you would least want in the United States in many cases. I'm talking about people from very backward, failed state, third world countries, very violent countries around the world, and countries that are known to harbor terrorists like Syria and Afghanistan and Somalia and places like that. So it does make sense for Panama to shut down the Darien Gap, and they could do it. The question has just been, do they have the political will to do it? Because it takes sort of being heartless in a sense. I mean, look, I've spent a lot of time down in the Darien Gap, and I've met hundreds and hundreds of these migrants coming through, and by and large, they're not bad people. Most of them are fleeing a place that you yourself would flee if you were in that situation. And most of them are certainly looking for a better life. Unfortunately for them, coming illegally into the United States is, illegal. And breaking the law isn't okay. There is a lawful way to immigrate, and there's no real reason why they need to come to the United States to begin with, because if they're in Venezuela, and Venezuela certainly is bad, they could easily come to any of a dozen countries in Latin America where they would speak the language, more closely understand the culture, and be able to make a better living than they make in Venezuela. So they can have a better life by going to Colombia. They can have a better life by going to Mexico or Guatemala or Nicaragua or Costa Rica or Panama. I could go on, Ecuador, Peru, etc. But they don't. They, by and large, are going to the United States. And why are they going to the United States? Well, they're going because right now they can. And they can make a lot more money in the United States than they could make if they were going to live in any of those other countries. Now, during the Trump administration, it wasn't like that. During the Trump administration, it was much, much harder to get into the United States because of the Remain in Mexico policy, that Title 42 that they had. And so because of the Remain in Mexico policy, many people didn't even bother to come to the United States. They would go south instead of north, so Venezuelans would go to Ecuador, or they would go to Peru, they'd go to Bolivia, and they would stay there. And so there's ample evidence that the Trump administration was far more effective at stopping the illegal flow of migrants into the United States than the Biden administration has been, or the Obama administration before him. So during the Biden-Harris administration, we have seen about 5 million people a year coming illegally into the United States. That gets us to the point where the total number of non-citizens living in the U.S. are somewhere around 10% of the total number of people in the United States. It's never been that high before. And I have to explain non-citizens. When I say non-citizens, I don't just mean illegals. I mean people who are here as naturalized citizens, legal residents, people with a green card, or people who are just completely illegal and undocumented. So as of the 2020 census, there were 23.2 million voting age non-citizens, and about half of those were illegal. That was as of 2020. We're 4 years later than that now. So now it's closer to 30 million. So 30 million people who are of voting age but cannot legally vote in the United States. Obviously, these people present a concern to people in the United States who can vote, because we don't want them voting illegally and skewing our elections. Now, understand that people who are non-citizens, whether they're here legally or not, are barred from voting in federal elections. There's no scenario where those people can legally vote. And so there have been a lot of people who have been very concerned about the inadequate enforcement of that rule, especially in states that have very lax ID requirements. This is why we're having this big fight with the Democrats over voter ID and requirements, because if you require people to show a legal identification, to show that they are legally a citizen before they're let in to vote, well, that would make it much harder for these people who are not legally able to vote to do so. So in some states, that's not even, that doesn't have to be something that's malevolent, where they are intentionally trying to defraud the system, because the system is set up to kind of encourage them to go vote. And many of these people, they haven't been here long, they don't speak a lot of English, and they're trying to do everything right so they don't get kicked out. And they go to get a driver's license, for example, which they are legally allowed to have. But when they get their driver's license, they are immediately registered to vote automatically. Now, they're supposed to like sort of volunteer the fact that, wait, I'm not a citizen and I'm not supposed to register to be registered to vote. But again, if they don't speak English and they don't really understand the system, there are lots of errors where people accidentally get registered to vote. And then they think, well, it says here I'm supposed to vote. So then they go and they vote. There's been a lot of legal wrangling over the last 4 years because there obviously, when stuff like that happens and when the system is set up to sort of have these loopholes where people can go and vote when they're not supposed to, well, that degrades the trust in the system. We don't trust our elections. Then fewer people who are supposed to vote are going to bother voting. They're just going to say, to heck with it. I'm just not going to vote because it doesn't matter. I mean, my vote's getting canceled out by a whole bunch of Guatemalans or something, right? So this is a serious issue that has been playing out in the courts for the last 4 years. Now, this current election, it will be less likely that people will be able to vote illegally than in the last election for two reasons: because of the legal challenges that were brought in the last 4 years to try to close some of those loopholes, and because we're not in the middle of COVID. So there are a lot fewer places where you can do mail-in voting. It's much more difficult to do mail-in voting. And that is going to make it less likely that people will steal the election, or whether it's accidental or intentional. Now, there have been studies on the electoral impact of non-citizens. And, mathematically, it's not really something we need to worry about a whole lot. And I want to explain to you why. This comes from the Center for Immigration Studies, so it's very trustworthy data. And they figure that there are only 12 states, I say only, not only, jumping up and down with your hair on fire on the roof screaming, there are 12 states and one district in Nebraska where voting age non-citizen populations theoretically exceed the margin of victory from the last presidential election in 2020. Meaning, if all of those non-citizens in those 12 states went to vote, they would easily sway the outcome of the election. So let's give you some examples. In Georgia, for example, only 1.5% of non-citizens of voting age would need to vote to match the 2020 margin of victory. In Arizona, it'd only be 1.7% would change the outcome. Now, it gets worse from there. You go places like Michigan and New Jersey, and it'd be like, 60 or 70% of the total number of non-citizens would have to vote illegally to make a difference in the outcome of the election. And that's highly unlikely. But since those polls have shown that those non-citizens, if they were allowed to vote, would vote at least 60 or 70% for Democrats, shows us that even a small percentage of illegal people casting a vote illegally would make a big difference. And it would be a cause for major concern in the upcoming election. And this is something that we definitely want to be leaning on our Congress critters about. We definitely want to keep in mind and have our eyes and ears open about. Now, let me just, as an aside, explain to you one of the reasons why I moved to Panama. It's not because I wanted to abandon my country. Don't you dare make that claim, because I fought and bled for this country. I love America. And one of the reasons that I moved to Panama is because I love America, because I watched massive voter fraud taking place in Detroit when I was there during the election cycle 2012, the second Obama election. And what I mean is I watched, it's illegal to do any electioneering within 1,000 feet of a polling place, because they don't want people being guilted into or threatened into voting a certain way. And so all of the electioneering should stop before you get to the door of the voting, the polls. But in 2012, in Detroit, there were people with Obama t-shirts on standing in the door of the election place, stopping people on the way in and saying, now, you're going to vote for Obama, right? You're going to vote for Obama, right? And if you had said, no, I'm going to vote for Romney, they wouldn't let you in. They would have ripped your arms off. So I got so disgusted by that and realized that this massive tax bill that I have to pay every year is going to fund programs that make people that dense or that ignorant. It goes to rewarding people like that with programs that will make it more likely that there will be more people like that in the next election. And that's why I want to point out something that I have seen twice now in this election cycle on the right, and this is concerning to me. Twice I have seen or heard viewers who have said, I went to vote today wearing my MAGA hat, and they told me I couldn't come in and cast my vote. And I said, there ain't no way I'm taking my hat off to come in and vote. I'm an American citizen. I get to vote. And I'm like, oh, come on, people. We have this rule for a reason. Do you want somebody standing in the door with a Kamala Harris t-shirt on, telling everybody that comes in they better make sure they vote for Kamala Harris? Well, if you don't, then take your stupid MAGA hat off and leave it in your truck when you go to vote. It works both ways. I know you're proud. I want to make America great too. But don't be stupid like the people on the other side. Okay? Rant over. That's all I want to say about that. Yeah, Romney did turn out to be a loser, didn't he? All right, I see a question here. Virginia is front and center with this. Do you think the Supreme Court will make a determination soon? I don't know. I can't say, Janetta. I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do. Sorry. If you have a question, put it in all caps, please, and Connie will pin it to the top of the chat so I'll see it. And let's move on. Now, let's talk about apportionment. This is one way where illegals actually do get to vote just by being in the United States that a lot of people don't understand. Every 10 years, we have a census in the United States, and the census just counts bodies. It just counts, living people. And Trump tried to get them to add a citizenship question on the census, and the left lost its ever-loving mind. It absolutely set its hair on fire and ran around in circles and definitely got its panties in a wad. Because why? Because if you know whether or not somebody that you're counting in the census is here illegally, then you could disqualify that number of people from counting in the apportionment statistics. See, this is how it works. For those that don't know, apportionment works like this. They count up the total number of bodies in a region or a state, and then they apportion out the number of representatives in the House of Representatives in the Congress based on the number of people. Doesn't matter if those people are legal or illegal. if we had a citizenship question on the census, we could discount the number of illegals, at least theoretically, and it would keep illegals from actually counting toward apportionment. But right now, we don't have that question on the census questionnaire. And so that has pretty serious implications for swapping numbers of people in the House. And I've seen numbers as high as 26, I'm sorry, as high as 4 seats in the House could flip from Republican to Democrat because of the apportionment issue, just because of the sanctuary cities. You ever wonder why these cities go, we welcome all immigrants? Because we know that those immigrants are expensive to the cities. They use a lot of city services and cost a lot of money in law enforcement, education, healthcare, things like that. Why would they do that? Why would they welcome these people in? Well, they're trying to stack the deck for apportionment. They're trying to get more congressional seats for their state. And then you'll notice that after the census gets finished, like it did in 2020, then immediately all those sanctuary cities start complaining about all the immigrants they have. Chicago and New York are 2 notable examples, who immediately started complaining about, we got to get these immigrants out of here. They cost too much money. And they do. But that's why. So large non-citizen populations in states that are traditionally red states, like Texas, could eventually shift political power toward the blue side through apportionment. And the people wouldn't have to actually be able to vote. They should, all they have to do is just be there. Ranko says, vote cattle. Yeah, maybe we should just count the number of deer and cattle in each state, and we should apportion based on those. Wisconsin would get a lot. Texas would get a lot. The rest of the states, maybe not so much. West Virginia would get more than it has, that's for sure. Now, let's talk about non-citizens and their cost on the American system. We have a robust welfare system in America, not just Social Security and Medicare, but things like the SNAP program for supplemental nutrition program. The Earned Income Tax Credit is a welfare program because a lot of people, if you have, if you qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit, you get money back from the IRS, even though you didn't pay anything in taxes. You paid no federal tax, but you still get money back. That's a welfare program. That's a wealth redistribution program, taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor. Okay, let's, I see a question here. What's your thinking on their deportation if Trump wins? Patrick, good question. Donald Trump says he's going to deport all these illegals. The problem is there are not enough CBP agents in the United States to deport all the people that needed to be deported. You think they're going to deport 10% of the country? 30 million people? Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Somebody is saying it would be better to help them bloom in place. Yes, actually it would, Caleb Fortune. One of the real negative effects of a lax immigration policy in the United States is brain drain everywhere else. All the people who have some hustle or who have a little bit of money will leave and go to the United States and leave behind all the people that don't have any hustle, don't have any money, and make the countries that they're in worse and worse and worse. This is what we've seen in Haiti, what we've seen in Venezuela, many other places. That is a serious problem. Well, so let's go back to these welfare programs. Did you know that non-citizen households use welfare at a much higher rate than citizen households do. So 49%, according to present data, of immigrant-headed households used at least one major welfare program, compared to 32% for native-born households. Welfare use, especially when you're talking about the earned income tax credit, 55% of non-citizens households use welfare. And that's 5 points higher than citizen households. They use Medicaid at a higher rate, 33% versus 20%. And SNAP and other food programs, the TAMF programs and all that, 31% versus 19%. And that's not because these people are lazy. It's because they're not highly educated for the most part. And they're coming in, starting from scratch, and they're poor. And that's what these programs are used to address. But one thing that I've pointed out many times in the past is that these migrants learn from each other. There are WhatsApp and Facebook groups, for example, that they're kind of like the, what do they call that? The hobo railroad or whatever, where they would make a mark on somebody's, a chalk mark on somebody's fence post. If they would give you if you're a hobo and then you come by and they give you a meal, you'd make a little chalk mark on their fence post to let other hobos know if somebody nice lives here that might give you something to eat. They kind of have a high-tech version of that on Facebook chats and WhatsApp groups. And so what these migrants will learn to do is they'll learn to game the system and sign up for multiple welfare and assistance programs in multiple states and garner as much aid as they can. And I've given examples of that where guys come in starting with nothing, and within a couple of months they're making $60,000 a year between welfare programs that they've signed up for, other humanitarian aid programs they've signed up for, and getting jobs under the table that won't, show up to disqualify them for their welfare programs. $60,000 a year. How'd you like to do that? Half of that comes from federal and state and local welfare programs. So it's almost like a, what do they call that? An individual basic income, where you just come in and we just immediately give you, $1,500 to $3,000 a month for $1,500 per person, $3,000 per couple. And you get to start there and then go out and get a job, waiting tables or washing cars or something under the table. And you can double that. Pretty soon you're making $6,000, $7,000 a month. These are people who left Haiti a few months ago where they were making $2 or $3 a day. Or they left Venezuela where they were making $12 a month. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that they should be able to come in to our country and immediately get so much money. This is why they're coming. They're not, their version of the American dream is to come and get the free stuff and then go get a better job. And I don't fault them for that all that much. Because you know what? If somebody's handing out cookies, don't get mad at me if I go get in line. I like cookies. And if they were offering $1 million a year, let's say, if you just could make it to Canada to do the same job you're doing now, but they just pay you $1 million a year on top of whatever you earn doing your job, all you had to do is jump the fence, there'd be a lot of Americans going up there to jump the fence. It's like winning the lottery for them, but it is not an asylum claim. It does not qualify them in any way, shape, or form for legal asylum. So they make an asylum claim, but their asylum claims are bogus. If they had a valid asylum claim, they would have claimed asylum in the first country they came to when they left their home country. So Venezuelans would have claimed asylum in Colombia, and they can get it. We are supporting a few single moms who are living in Colombia. They're Venezuelan women. They had to leave their own country. And they work, they can get a job, they can start a business, they can legally live in Colombia. So they don't need to come to the United States. It's just a matter of, well, if you could go, let's say you live in Nebraska and you could go to California and make twice as much as you're making now, or you could go to Texas and make 5 times as much as you're making now. Well, you'd probably go to Texas, and who would blame you? So most legal and many illegal immigrants meet the requirements to get access to some form of welfare, whether it's federal, state, local, or charitable. If non-citizens have children once they get to the United States, then they can access more welfare legally on behalf of their American-born children because their kids are now American citizens. And so that's why we see these people almost, when couples come across, one of the first things they do is have a baby because it makes them more money. We are incentivizing this. Virginia Smith says, how does popular vote affect the electoral vote? They're 2 separate things, and that's not the topic of this live, so I'm gonna ignore that question for now. Deportation immigrant, just place them back over on the Mexican border. Mexico, let them come through, let Mexico deal with them. Yeah, unfortunately, GJ, you can't just do that. That is against international law. You can't push them back. If they come into our country, doesn't matter how they got here, you cannot push them back into Mexico without Mexico's assent. Unless they're Mexican, then you can. If you can keep them from coming into the United States from Mexico, like the Remain in Mexico policy did, well, then that's a different story. Then we can easily keep them there. We just can't put them back there if they've already made it into the U.S. Now, 40% of non-citizens, illegal and legal immigrants, who have been in the United States less than 10 years use welfare of some kind. And after 10 years, that number goes up to 62%. So it's not like eventually they just start making more and more money and then they get off the welfare. No, they're going to milk that as long as they can. That's what I was getting at there. Now, here's the balance that we need to talk about. A lot of people are worried about illegal immigrants trying to vote or being able to vote and swaying the elections that way. But I would submit to you that that's not that much of a concern, because the fact that they are here in the United States and the fact that they could possibly find a way to vote illegally is going to make enough legal American voters vote for Donald Trump so that he will address this problem, that it will cancel out any illegal votes that actually do get cast. It's still a bad thing if they vote illegally, but I don't think it's that much of a concern. I want to ease your mind a little bit on that, because there are a lot of people. This is a huge issue in this particular election, and it may very well change the outcome of this election, because Kamala Harris is wearing this like a noose around her neck. I want to point out something here. I have a graph to show you, and this is the number of people being picked up at the southern border by the CBP. This is going back to, we look here, just this January, it hit a high of over 240,000 people picked up in the month of January and then, or December, I mean, and then it dropped precipitously down to a much lower, about half that. Why? Because Joe Biden went to Mexico and met with Manuel Lopez Obrador, the former president of Mexico, and made a deal with him and offered him billions of dollars of incentives and about 800,000 work visas to the United States for Mexican citizens in exchange for Mexico clamping down on the number of people it allowed through its country to come to the U.S. So that's one big reason. But there's some other numbers that are not being shown in that number, and that is the CBP-1 program. So the CBP-1 is an app that you can get on your phone if you live outside the United States, if you're not a U.S. citizen, and you can get pre-authorized to come into the United States. You're still not a legal resident. You don't have residency. You're actually just authorized to be in line for an asylum claim. The asylum claim is not adjudicated by the CBP-1 app. It just puts you in the line, which is millions of people long and could take years. So it's the same thing that happens when people show up illegally at the U.S. southern border and present themselves to a Border Patrol agent and say, I want to claim asylum in the United States. And the Border Patrol agent says, why do you think you qualify for asylum? And he says, well, I was persecuted by my government and I was beat up by a policeman in my home country, and so I had to flee. And the Border Patrol agent says, well, okay, I'll take your name and number. All right, we don't have space for you in the, detention center, so we're just going to set you free, and here's your court date. Or you're going to have to check back with us in 6 months to get a court date because we're out of court dates. So that's what happens when somebody presents himself at the U.S. southern border. But through the CBP-1 app, they don't have to trek all the way to the U.S. southern border to do that. They can have that initial interview through the app. And then if they're given the go-ahead, which most are, for an asylum claim, then they can just get on a plane in their home country and fly directly to Cleveland or Texas or New York, wherever they want to go. And if you've been through any U.S. airports lately, I guarantee you have rubbed shoulders with these people. They usually are carrying a little plastic, like a envelope with some paperwork in it. And they might have a little tag around their neck or something, and they look kind of lost. And you hear them speaking foreign languages. These are people that are coming in through this CBP-1 app. And part of the reason for that big precipitous drop is because of the growth in people that are being allowed in illegally through the CBP-1 app. Now, it shows here that they're trying to make the point here that the number of apprehensions by Mexico has gone up. And it did go up a little bit from January to about June, for about 6 months this year. But then it started going back down again. And it has crossed over. They are picking up more people. They're apprehending more people in Mexico than they are at the U.S. southern border. But that, again, does not include those hundreds of thousands of people who are being allowed in every month. It's about 1,400 or 1,500 people every day being allowed in using the CBP-1 app, on top of the number that you see here of CBP apprehensions every month. So we've been saying all along, the Biden-Harris administration is going to do this with the CBP-1 app specifically to make the numbers look better than they actually are ahead of the election. So they paid Mexico to apprehend more people for the time being. Mexico is just holding those people on the Mexican side, and they're building up and building up and building up. There is an absolute tsunami of illegal immigrants waiting in Mexico right now to cross the border as soon as the election is over. You're going to see that on November 6th. There will be a flood of people coming across the U.S. southern border, whether or not Donald Trump is elected. But especially if Donald Trump is elected. If Donald Trump gets elected on November 5th, there will be, mark my words, a tsunami of astronomical proportions coming across the U.S. southern border between November and January when he's inaugurated. But even if he's not elected, if Kamala Harris gets in, then there won't be any reason for them to keep holding them in Mexico anymore. And that's costing Mexico money. So Mexico will let them go and they will come into the United States. So if Kamala Harris gets elected, you can expect not another 10 million in the next 4 years, but probably 15 to 20 million in the next 4 years coming in across the border, because they know that she won't be able to she could do 2 terms, but she won't have any reason to stop it, is what I'm saying. So that's a pretty big deal. Now, Phoenix design guy says, I've seen clips mentioning deporting entire families, including naturalized children. Any validity to this? That's a real problem. It's a real thorny problem. They really cannot deport somebody who's a legal citizen. And if they're deporting their parents and the kid is an American citizen, that presents, you can imagine what the outcry would be from the left and from the media. So, holy cow, it would go absolutely bonkers. So we will see what gets done with that. To answer that previous question, though, about Donald Trump being able to deport all those people, there's just no way. I mean, even if you brought in the entire U.S. military, that's only 1.5 million people. You're not going to deport 30 million people. I mean, you're just not. And more wanting to come in, it would just be an absolute madhouse. Now, can you deport the worst of them? Yeah. Could we deport 10 million if we were really, really brutally efficient about it? If we put Musk in charge of deporting people that aren't supposed to be here, then maybe, because Musk has no empathy whatsoever. I'm reading his biography right now, and it's one of the reasons he's been so successful is he just doesn't care what people think. So could we deport a bunch of those people? Yeah, and that would be nice, but it's not likely. Now, let's put all this in context. Non-citizens, legal and illegal, will definitely affect this election, but they will affect them in 2 different ways. I mean, do they cost America a lot of money, American taxpayers a lot of money? Yes. And that's a very bad thing. But the fact that they cost American taxpayers so much money is part of the reason why Donald Trump may actually win this election. And so if Donald Trump wins the election, you might have these migrants to thank for that. Isn't that ironic? Now, could Donald Trump stop the flow of illegal migrants into America? Sure, he could. Absolutely. He's going to get pushback from, the Congress and the Senate. Even if there's a majority, if we get a Republican majority in both houses, it doesn't really matter, because the Republicans are not actually all Republicans. There's a whole bunch of Republicans that are far too liberal and would still buck Donald Trump in doing a lot of this. So, rhinos, as we say, Republicans in name only. But could he do it? Yes. There are lots of ways he could do it. One of the best ways he could do it is one that he didn't try last time, and that would be putting a tax on the migrants. So the new president of Panama just instituted a fine for people coming across the border illegally. That fine is it's $300. And you know what? If they don't have $300 and they come into Panama illegally, then they automatically get deported. They have no right to an asylum claim. They get sent out of this country. And if their home country won't accept them back, which is a big problem, countries like Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela won't take their people back, then Panama is trying to make a deal with India to send them to India. Can you imagine that? A bunch of Venezuelans and Cubans and Haitians ending up in India? They would be begging to get sent back to Haiti for the most part, at least from what I understand about what I've seen the very short time I was in India. It's not a whole lot better than where they came from. And it'd be a lot harder for them to be repeat offenders. Panama is increasing fines if somebody tries a second time. It's $500, and then goes up to, I think, $1,500 if they keep trying to get in. So if we just put a tax or a fine on every person that gets picked up by the U.S. Border Patrol, pay your $300 fine to make an asylum claim, or we immediately deport you somewhere. I'm not sure how well that would work, but it's worth a try. Something that would work much better would be taxing remittances. If they come into the United States and they get a job and they start working, they are almost always going to send money back home to finance their families and perhaps the next wave of illegal migration. They've been doing that for decades. So putting a large tax of maybe 50% on remittances is going to reduce the incentive for people to come to the United States and make going to Ecuador, for example, look a little more inviting. We could also make any illegal migrant ineligible for any, and I mean any, federal, state, or local welfare program. That would be, that would do the job right there. People would just stop coming. Yeah, they can make more money here, but all things considered, it's easier for them to stay in Colombia and make, $30 or $40 a day than to come to the United States to make $60 or $80 or $100 a day. So you add on top of that, finishing the border wall. It's not perfect. They can cut it down, they can climb over, but not in the numbers that they're coming right now. I've been there many times, and believe me, you go to a place where there's a 30-foot wall, there's not going to be a lot of people coming through that. You go to a place where there's a hole in that 30-foot wall, and it's like a funnel, and there's just thousands of people streaming through those holes. I know right where to go. I was talking to somebody the other day. If I wanted to, because I can only spend, as a U.S. citizen who's an expat who lives outside the United States, I qualify for a tax status. It's called the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, because my bona fide abode is in Panama. And it saves me quite a bit of money on my taxes. It's one of the reasons I moved. I don't want to feed the beast by paying such high taxes. But if I spend more than 35 days a year in the United States for pleasure, I lose that tax status. And so it would cost me a heck ton of money to be in the United States more than 30 days. Well, what if I want to spend more time with my grandkids? Or what if I want to go, relax at my farm in West Virginia for more than a month? Well, I'm out of luck. Unless I just wanted to cross illegally into the United States. Now, I'm not going to do that, but if I wanted to, believe me, I know right where I could go. And I could very, very easily infiltrate into my own country. Isn't it crazy I'd have to do that? Infiltrate into my own country and then go spend 6 months, enjoying myself with my grandkids, and then infiltrate out the same way I came in, and the U.S. and be none the wiser. But of course, I'm not going to do that. Now, here's the sad thing. I'm a veteran. As I said before, I have fought and bled for America. And I'm only allowed 35 days a year in the United States, or I lose my tax status. But if I were to renounce my citizenship, give up my U.S. citizenship, go get a passport for Portugal or someplace, I could spend 6 months a year in the United States and pay no tax legally. If I had a passport for Portugal, which I could get in about 3 years, 3 to 5 years it'd take me to do that, I could legally, without a visa, because it's a Schengen country, travel to the United States and spend 180 days a year there without paying any taxes, just as a tourist. Isn't that crazy? I'd actually have more benefits in the United States if I gave up my citizenship than I do as a citizen. If that doesn't make your blood boil, I don't know what will. Okay, here's another question from Michael Giardini. If all Trump's policies were in place, this wouldn't be an issue. Where was the uproar when it started? Yes, exactly. Where was the uproar when the Biden administration canceled all of Trump's policies the first day of his presidency, only to start slowly and quietly trying to add them back in when the immigration issue became such a hot topic that they realized it might lose them the election? It's what they started to do. I was down there reporting on the southern border when the Biden administration started quietly, filling the gaps in the wall, building the wall that they swore they were never going to allow to be built, that they said was worthless, that didn't do any good. The Biden administration themselves went down and started quietly building that wall. I was there to see it. Patrick Wickersham says, in Wisconsin, the amount of deer hunters that purchased a license were an army. It would be the 6th largest army on earth. Yep. Same in West Virginia. Question from KP1. You may have covered it earlier. Should we be concerned about the illegals rioting if Trump wins? We should be concerned about rioting if Trump wins, and likely rioting even if he doesn't. But just based on the experience from last time, I was there in Washington, D.C. for Trump's inauguration. And the rioting that took place was orders of magnitude worse than the protests that happened on January 6th when Biden was inaugurated. And I say that without reservation. It was orders of magnitude worse. And so that tells us that it is likely that the unrest that we will see in America if Trump wins will be orders of magnitude worse than it was the last time, because they have done everything they could possibly do, to include putting grandmothers in prison and suing Donald Trump for everything under the sun, trying to put him in jail, get him kicked off social media platforms, everything they could possibly think of to keep him from getting back in office. So if he does get back in office as a giant throbbing middle finger to the left of America, you can bet there is going to be massive unrest, and you better prepare now. That's why I just wrote this book. It's called Death of Civilization, and it is full of checklists that you can go through to make sure that you are prepared for any kind of unrest that may come your way after the coming election. It's the reason I put it out as a PDF rather than publishing it as a softcover yet because I wanted you to have the information. It would have taken too long to get it out as a softcover. So you can go get that by becoming a supporter at chuckholton.com. Just go to chuckholton.com, sign up as a supporter, and you can download the PDF of that book and of the booklet that I just, it's kind of a companion booklet that I just released on how to help your church start a crisis intervention team or a crisis response team. In my opinion, that is exactly what the men's group at your church should look like. The men's group at your church should not be a bunch of guys sitting around making each other feel bad for not spending enough time at home while they're not spending time at home. They're spending time with each other. Those kinds of men's groups are men's groups that look like they were designed by women. Let's come sit around and talk about our feelings. I think men's groups should be a lot more hardcore than that. Men's groups should be all about helping people in times of crisis. And we should be more like a search and rescue team than like a women's knitting circle. And so the Grace Project is the booklet I put out about how to start a group like that at your church and have your church be ready for any kind of unrest that comes as well. Okay, here's another question real quick. If by some miracle all the corrupt programs that our taxes help pay for went away, would you consider moving back to the U.S. or would you be content to stay in Panama? We love it here in Panama. We didn't just move to Panama because of the tax implications or because I didn't want to feed the beast or because they were trying to make me spend $20,000 a year on Obamacare that I didn't want or for all the other reasons. We moved to Panama because we like Panama and we love it here. My wife is really allergic to this phenomenon that they have in the United States called winter. And so since we don't have that here in Panama, it keeps Mama happy. And if Mama's happy, then I'm happy. And so we like Panama for lots of reasons. It's a safe, tranquil, peaceful place where nobody wants to kill me. I don't have any ex-girlfriends. And so I like it here. And my monkeys are here. And I can't bring the monkeys to the United States. So we'll stay in Panama for the time being. And if you would be interested in me doing a podcast about your options regarding voting with your feet, that is moving out of the United States, moving to a different place in the United States, what kind of criteria you should look at, what kind of things you should be concerned about, what kind of checklists you would need to make sure you're moving to some place that you're not going to regret. Put a yes in the comments for me real quick, and then I will, if enough people are interested, I will put out a booklet on that as soon as possible and probably do a live about it where we can specifically chat about what your options are as far as moving out of the United States, tell you a little bit about our experiences after living for more than 13 years in Panama and what we would do differently if we had it to do over again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, if you're interested, we're thinking about offering a very, very limited trip to Panama to come here to the volcanic crater that we've called home for 13 years and have a reboot sometime around the first of the year. Just come here and relax at a nice resort for 4 or 5 days and not go crazy, not kill yourself, not go see every site there is to see in Panama. Just relax and maybe look at a couple of places where you might be interested in moving when you retire or something like that. Having some one-on-one discussions with me and Connie about what that would entail, answering all your questions, kind of a behind-the-scenes moment with the Holton family. Get to meet the monkeys and hang out at our place. It's be very, very limited group. We're talking about 9 couples or less because of the hotel that we would have you guys put up in. But if you're interested in something like that, get a hold of me on my email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com. Go to hotzoneholton@gmail.com and send me an email and say, I would be interested in coming to Panama at some point to learn more about my options. And we'll decide whether or not it's worth putting that together. All of this is driven by you guys, not by us. So again, go to chuckholton.com, become a supporter, download the book And when the soft cover comes out, I will let you know, and maybe we'll have a discount for our supporters to get the hardcover or soft cover, when we put that out. But for now, you can get the book with all the checklists and everything as a downloadable PDF. And you can also get the Grace Project about the crisis intervention team at your church just by being a supporter on chuckholton.com. And so we appreciate all of you. We're going to be coming out with more. We're working right now on a very exciting coffee table book for the end of the year that will have some amazing photographs that I've taken just this year. I've got 90 million photos that I've taken over my career, but we're going to do a coffee table book for 2024 and maybe make it a tradition. At the end of the year, we'll put out a coffee table book, and all the proceeds of that coffee table book will go to supporting some of the people that we take care of around the world. More than 40 people now that we're supporting thanks to your generosity. So, hey, thank you, GJ. I appreciate that. Yeah, Chinese actually don't run the Panama Canal. That's a misconception. The Chinese manage the ports on either side of the canal, but it's in the Panamanian Constitution that only Panamanians can run the canal. So yeah, that's a lot of people think that, Kevin, but that's actually not the case. Patrick, don't you dare bring Connie any snow. She gets cold just thinking about it. And she doesn't like being cold, and I don't like her being cold because then she wraps up and, in her woolly mammoth suit, and I don't like that at all. Okay, well, God bless you guys. That's all I've got for today. Thank you for watching the Hot Zone, and stay tuned. We got more coming. We'll see you.